Our Bible reading today is from John chapter 10, verses 1 to 21, which can be found on page 26 of the book if you've got a pink one, and page 32 if you've got a blue one. But before I read, let us pray. Jesus says, "Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away." Heavenly Father, thank you that your word is eternal. It stands firm in the heavens. We pray, therefore, that you'd help us to pay careful attention to your word this morning. We pray that your Holy Spirit would be with Andrew as he helps us to understand what your word says and its implications for our lives. For your glory, amen. So that's John chapter 10, verses 1 to 21 on page 26 of the pink or page 32 of the blue. Very truly, I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but the Pharisees did not understand what he was telling them. Therefore, Jesus said again, "Very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheepfold. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life, only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father." The Jews who heard these words were again divided. Many of them said, "He is demon-possessed and raving mad. Why listen to him?" But others said, "These are not the sayings of a man possessed by a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind?"
Hey, thanks for inviting me today. I'm glad to say I also got the memo about the dress code. What are the chances, eh? And I particularly was sort of reflecting on Isaac when he was talking about coming here for the first time, not really sure where he stood as a Christian, walking into a building like this. And it just sort of gave me a flashback. So I started university in 1993. I know I don't look that old. But I remember coming to this church, invited by friends from St. John's, some kind of religious background, but I kind of dismissed it all. And just being here thinking, what am I going to do with my life? And is Jesus going to feature in that? And it's quite an intimidating thing. And if that's you today, then, well done for walking through the door. I can still remember what it was like to do that. We're asking this question today, is Jesus a better leader? Is he the one we should follow? So we're asking more than just, does Christianity make philosophical sense? You need to ask that question. Is it true? Does it hang together? Does it explain the world? And I think it does. And you need to investigate that perhaps. We're asking more than just, is it scientifically credible? And again, my background was in Natski, and I think it is. We looked on Friday night. If you missed the talk, you can get all of them on YouTube. But on Friday night, we were looking at Jesus turning water into wine and how this is quite unusual chemistry required. But actually, philosophically, it makes sense that he would be able to do that. And do listen to that talk if you missed it. You've got to discover whether this is historically credible. I mean, did this actually happen? And on Thursday night, we had an expert from the Tyndale House Biblical Research Library, Dr. Peter Williams, exploring all sorts of manuscript evidence, archaeological evidence for that. And again, if you missed that, you can get the talk on YouTube. You've got to ask that. You've got to know if it's true. Is it philosophically true? Is it scientifically true? Is it historically true? That's important. But you've got to go one step further, because today Jesus isn't just saying, I want you to agree with my ideas. He's saying, I want you to follow me as your master or as your shepherd. In this analogy, Jesus, the good shepherd, we are the sheep, not very flattering, maybe not the most intelligent animal, but here we are, we're sheep trying to decide who to follow. And Jesus says, follow me. And I think of this as kind of his manifesto for why you should choose him. Don't know if you voted, probably you didn't. Students don't normally vote in local elections because of all the hassle of registering for a postal vote at home and whatever. But maybe you vote in a general election, or the next one you will, and you look at the manifestos. This is Jesus' one. Not just that you should believe in me intellectually, but you should follow me with your life. That's the question we're looking at today. And of course, as soon as we encounter someone with a political manifesto asking to be our leader, we are immediately suspicious. Because ours is a culture that is really wary of authority and of those who are trying to be in charge of us. You just look in Russia, Ukraine right now, and look at the abuses of power when it's all concentrated in one megalomaniac like Putin. And it's bad news for people in Ukraine. It's bad news for quite a lot of people in Russia as well, that he is ruling over them. Or you look at North Korea or whatever. And we can't just sort of smugly wave the finger, those of us who live in the UK, because our own government, has just been scandal after scandal. The expenses scandal, if you remember that, and then Partygate scandal, and then pornography in Parliament scandal, and just one after the other. And we're just very cynical about people in charge. And if you're studying philosophy, I was a Natsky, so I don't really understand much about philosophy, but I did try, when I was at theological college, to read some of the writings of Michel Foucault, the French philosopher. And even if you haven't read him, and it's pretty difficult to understand him, to be fair, his ideas have influenced our society massively. Foucault's idea was that actually everyone is trying to get power over you. And almost every speech or every action is a power play. And you've got to be really wary of it. And Foucault's own solution was to try and live without any restraints at all, to try and escape it. But of course, none of us can. I want to quote another great philosopher, not Michel Foucault, but arguably a greater philosopher than him, the philosopher Bob Dylan. I love this song. You may be an ambassador to England or France. You might like to gamble. You might like to dance. You may be the heavyweight champion of the world. You may be a socialite with a long string of pearls. But you've got to serve somebody. Yes, indeed. You're going to have to serve somebody. It may be the devil or it may be the Lord, but you're going to have to serve somebody. You may be a straight trooper. You may be a young Turk. You may be the head of some big TV network. You may be rich or poor. You may be blind or lame. You may be living in another country under another name. But you're going to have to serve somebody. Yes, indeed. You're going to have to serve somebody. It might be the devil. It may be the Lord. You're going to have to serve somebody. I'm going to keep going because I like it so much. I won't read the whole thing. But here's another one. You may be a preacher with your spiritual pride. You may be a city councilman taking bribes on the side. You may be working in a barbershop. You may know how to cut hair. You may be someone's mistress. You may be someone's heir. But you're going to have to serve somebody. Yes, indeed. You're going to have to serve somebody. And I think Bob Dylan is right. We don't escape having lords or masters or gurus or role models. All of us are working for somebody else's approval. And I guess this term, maybe it's your director of studies, or it's those who set the exams, or maybe in Michaelmas term it was the person choosing the first rugby team, or deciding who would be in the boat. Or maybe after university, it's going to be the interview panel of the company that you want to work for, or your boss, or once you are the boss, it'll be your shareholders, or it'll be your family, it will be your friends that you're trying to be popular and get their approval. And whoever we are, we just don't escape having a master, a guru, someone that we follow. And Jesus is saying, given that you've got to serve somebody, I suggest it should be me. He's putting himself forward as the best leader. And we're going to have to assess that claim and decide whether he's worth it. But you can see straight away that Jesus he's persuading us why he's a good bet to follow. So Jesus says, for example, that he has come to make life really good. I don't know if that's your impression of Christianity. We're talking on Friday night about Jesus turning water into wine. And I was sharing the story of a friend of mine. He found that a huge surprise because he expected Jesus to be turning wine into water. You know, God's great fear is that someone might be enjoying themselves, and that must be stopped. But Jesus says, no, I've come to give people life and life to the full. That little trailer for the video we watched, it comes from this verse 10 on page, I can't say the page number because you might have the blue one, but chapter 10, verse 10, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. And then Jesus describes what life to the full means in a metaphor that works if you imagine that you're a sheep. So in the analogy, Jesus is a shepherd, you're a sheep. If you're a sheep, what would you most love? Well, you can't get much more exciting than this as you're a sheep. They'll come in and go out and find pasture, crunchy green grass. That's amazing for a sheep. But think of the human equivalent of what that would be. Abundance and pleasure and enjoyment and grazing on the hillside. That's what Jesus is about. He said, I've come to give you good things. And Jesus also says, I'm committed to doing what's needed to get that for you. The Good Shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. I'll sacrifice myself to make that possible for you. And then, as well as telling us that he'll be great, Jesus warns us that other would-be shepherds will hurt us. All who ever came before, says Jesus, were thieves and robbers. So Jesus is saying, I suggest you vote for me. He's also saying, be very careful about the alternatives. Now, when Jesus is talking about this sort of analogy of a shepherd and so on, he's actually not inventing the idea. He's picking it up from a prophecy written about 700 years before by a guy called Ezekiel, a Jewish prophet. And in about 700 years before Jesus, Ezekiel, he brings God's prophecy against the rulers and the kings at the time in Israel. And God is actually very angry with the leaders. And he says, woe to the leaders, woe to the shepherds, because the weak you have not strengthened, the sick you have not healed, the injured you have not bound up, the strayed you've not brought back, the lost you have not sought, with force and harshness you have ruled them. In other words, God says, I've seen the leaders and I see that everyone is in for themselves and they're devouring the sheep. They're in it for what they can get. And God says, I'm against that. And God hates it when the vulnerable in society are trampled by those just trying to climb the ladder. And he says, woe to you. As we see in the papers, these scandals, God is angry with them. Not just in Russia, but in London and everywhere where corrupt leadership is exploitative. God says, woe to the shepherds. And then through Ezekiel, 700 years before Jesus, he makes this amazing promise of how he's going to fix it. God said, I myself will be the shepherd of my sheep. I myself will make them lie down. I'll seek the lost. I'll bring back the strayed. I'll bind up the injured. I'll strengthen the weak. The fat and the strong, the abusive sheep, I will destroy, says God. So God says, I just look out the world. I see everywhere leadership, authority is used corruptly to destroy people, to trample people. And I've had enough of it. I'm going to come and do it myself. Now, given that prophecy, you can see another dimension, can't you, to what Jesus is claiming here. When Jesus shows up and says, I am the good shepherd, then anyone with Jewish ears to hear, anyone who knows the ancient prophecies, realizes that Jesus is saying, I'm God. I've come to do the thing that God was going to do personally. Here I am. I'm the one you can trust to shepherd differently, to bring you the good pasture. And when it comes to the test, I will lay down my life to give it to you. Now, that's an excellent test, isn't it? Just what someone promises in a manifesto is not really a good test. People always promise you the earth. But are they prepared actually to do the costly thing personally to bring it to you? It's one of the reasons why Zelensky, I think, is so impressive, isn't he? Because we're just used to self-serving leaders. He, it seems to be a really courageous, self-sacrificial leader. You know, the president of Afghanistan, he was the first to flee the country with a suitcase full of money, whereas here's Zelensky, and he's staying put. We're impressed by that because you trust the leader who's willing to stand in the day of trouble. And Jesus says even more than that. He says, I've come to lay down my life for the sheep. He's referring to his crucifixion. And then to take up my life again. He's referring to his resurrection. Now, this is I think it's an amazing manifesto. But I want us to see it's not just words. It's not just a claim. It's actually a commentary on what's already just happened, on some events that happened in the previous chapter. Now, this is really important because anyone can say stuff, can't they? I mean, political speeches are always persuasive to the people. You know, Hitler's speeches, everyone goes, yes, this is amazing. If you've got the gift of oratory, you can move people with a speech. But Jesus isn't just about oratory. He's not just about fine-sounding words. He does stuff that have been witnessed, and that John, who writes this book, he was there. And it's the stuff that he does that matches the things that he says. And you'll see just at the end of our reading, so if you look at verse 21, there's controversy about Jesus' manifesto, and some people say he's demon-possessed and raving mad, and others said, these are not the sayings of a man possessed by a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind? And actually that's a reference to what has only just happened in the previous chapter. And we're going to look back at it. And I want you to spot, as we do, that actually what Jesus just said is a commentary about these events. So as I read it, ask yourself, can I find the three main characters or the three main groups of characters from Jesus' manifesto? So we're looking out for a sheep. I think it's going to be pretty easy to find the sheep, to be honest. We're looking for some thieves and robbers, some out for themselves fake leaders, and we're looking for a good shepherd. Okay, this is Jesus' commentary. We're now going to look at the events about which he's commentating. So turn back a couple of pages to chapter 9, and I'm going to read it, but also kind of stop along the way and explain it as we go. So as Jesus went along, he saw a man who'd been blind from birth. Jesus' disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Just let me pause there. We were talking yesterday about Jesus and other religions and talking about the question of suffering. And I was saying Jesus' answer is very different from other religions. And you see this here, actually. So here in verse 2 is the principle of karma in Hinduism and in Buddhism, where you kind of get back what you deserve. So suffering is payback for something bad you did in this life or maybe in a former life. And many people in the world believe that, and Jesus does not believe in that. So, Rabbi, who sinned? Here's a guy who's blind. Obviously, someone did something wrong if God punished him with blindness. Who was it? Did he do something wrong or did his parents do something wrong? Jesus says, no, it doesn't work like that. Neither this man nor his parents sinned, says Jesus. Jesus does not believe in karma. But this happens so that the work of God might be displayed in him. As long as it's day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. After saying this, he spat on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam. This word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. Now, this is incredible, right? If this happened, it is extraordinary. Here's a man who's been blind his whole life. Jesus makes some mud paste with spit, puts it on his eyes, he washes it off, and now he can see. And it only takes, 7 verses to say that in that whole chapter. And some of you are thinking, yeah, but did he really? Like, did this actually happen? You can't expect me to believe just on the rumours of some religious book that a blind man suddenly can see. Like, really? And if you're thinking that, the good news for you is that people who were there at the time are thinking, really? And the whole of the rest of the chapter is devoted to their examination of the evidence. It's like a kind of court case as they go over it in minute detail. And we start with verse 8. His neighbours and those who'd formerly seen him begging said, "Isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg?" Some claimed that he was. Others said, no, he just looks like him. But he said, no, it is me. It can't be you because, the man who's begging was blind and now you can see it. It can't be you, can it? Or, no, well, how were your eyes opened? He said, well, this man called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go and Siloam and wash, and I washed, and now I could see. Where is this man? I don't know. Now, again, let me just pause. It's easy to fake a healing, isn't it? I mean, I could do it today. I didn't do the advance planning, but I could have, just before the service, slipped one of you 50 quid and said, I don't know what your acting skills are like, but do you mind hobbling into the church and come up to the front, and then I will dramatically heal you, and then you can dance out, and then people will then give enormous donations to the church because of this amazing healing, and then I'll share some of the profits with you. And you go, okay. I mean, that's how it works, isn't it? You can do the fake healing with the stooge. It's kind of more difficult in this case, though, isn't it, to say, excuse me, to somebody just before they're born or just after they're born, excuse me, baby child, do you mind pretending that you're blind for your entire life? And, some years later, I'm going to come along and dramatically heal you. I mean, how do you fake this? Because everyone in the village knows this guy, right? He's a known character, and it's known that he is blind. Well, they're just confused. Is it the same guy? Is it somebody who just looks like him? They brought to the Pharisees, verse 13, the man who had been blind. Now, the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was a Sabbath. It was a Saturday. And again, we looked at this yesterday. If you made it, or if not, catch up on YouTube. The Pharisees had a particular interpretation of the Sabbath, which meant they were very cross with Jesus for healing on Saturdays. The Jewish scriptures had said that God wanted us to have a day of rest once a week. It's meant to be a great blessing to us. They turned it into a sort of very rigid and graceless ritual. And they were very cross, basically, that Jesus did it on a Saturday. So they say, how did you receive your sight? He put mud on my eyes, he said, I washed and now I see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. Others said, how can a sinner perform such signs? So they were divided. Now this is interesting, isn't it? Because the verdict on what Jesus has done depends actually on the presuppositions of the people who are looking into it. The evidence says there's been an amazing healing, blind man can see, but some people decide that can't have happened because they've already decided that Jesus doesn't fit their categories. He's not what they expect or what they want. He breaks the Sabbath. He's not from God. This didn't happen, they say. And I think people today do the same thing, actually. So maybe, I don't know, you've come to church today and you're an atheist, as I was, and you've already made a whole load of presuppositions like there is no God, and if there's no God, then miracles are impossible, and if there's no God and miracles are impossible, then this didn't happen, and therefore it's all rubbish. Okay, but that isn't actually telling us much about the evidence. It's just telling us about you and the fixed beliefs that you've come with. Just like the Pharisees have these fixed beliefs. Jesus can't be from God if he did it on a Saturday. And actually, it blinds them to the evidence that's actually there. It's just a caution for us if that's true of you as well. So they asked the blind man, what have you got to say? It was your eyes he opened. The man said, he's a prophet. They still did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they sent for the man's parents. Because they should know, right? Is this your son, they asked? Is this the one that you say was born blind? You can see the hostility in the question. How is it that he can now see? Well, we know he's our son, the parents answered, and we know he was born blind. But how he can see now or who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him. He's of age. Ask him. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders, who already had decided that anyone who acknowledged that Jesus was the Messiah would be thrown out of the synagogue. That's why his parents said, he's of age, ask him. And you see what's going on here? That the religious leaders are bullying people to toe their particular line, their particular ideas. And people are scared to speak about Jesus because of the threats. Now, I think this is helpful because nowadays, Christianity is a global phenomenon and, a billion people in the world follow Jesus. And sometimes people are a bit cynical and they say, well, are you just in the church because it's an institution with great heritage in Britain? And in my case, I'm a vicar, so I get to live in a Church of England vicarage and, you get paid for only working on Sundays, people think. Trust me, we do more than that. But they think, are you just in it for what you can get? And I think it's just helpful to remember that in the first century, and indeed for many people around the world today, to be a Christian really costs you. The early Christians didn't get rich or live in vicarages or have the prestige of being part of the establishment. They were marginalised and threatened. And yet they testify very bravely to what they'd seen. Anyway, so the parents ask him, so a second time they get the guy in. Give glory to God by telling you the truth, they say, religious pressure applied. We have already decided that this man's a sinner, so what do you have to say? And at this point he says, look, your theological debates I'm going to leave for you. I'm just going to tell you the basic facts. I don't know whether he's a sinner or not, but I do know this. I was blind and now I can see. And this is a very clear fact, for this guy, because he's never, ever been able to see, then mud paste, and now he can see. So this is the central fact for him. And they ask, well, what did he do to you? How did he do it? And this is kind of getting a bit ridiculous because we've now heard several times. You know how he did it. Saliva, mud, paste, go to the pool, wash and see. So it's well, I've told you already. I can tell you again. Why do you want to keep hearing this? Do you want to become his disciples too? I think he's just baiting them at this point. And they just absolutely lose it at this point. They hurled insults at him and said, you are this fellow's disciple. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses. As for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from. Don't know who you expect to be the biggest friends of Jesus. Who would instinctively like him? Religious people? The religious people hated Jesus because he called out their hypocrisy. He was willing to challenge them. And the ordinary people, like this poor blind man, his ordinary family, they're the people that loved him. And he says to them, well, this is remarkable. I did the facts, but I'll do a bit of theology of my own, if you like. It's remarkable. You don't know where he comes from. He opened my eyes. We know that God doesn't listen to sinners. He listens to the godly person who does his will. No one has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he can do nothing. Another aside. Sometimes we dismiss first century people as being scientifically credulous. Bless them. They just didn't understand biology. They didn't realise that miracles were impossible. That's not the case, is it? You don't have to know a whole lot about ophthalmology to know that people who are blind for their entire life don't see because of mud paste. You kind of learn this pretty quickly if you've got a blind person in your family. They know this. They know this has never happened. It's never been heard of that this could happen. And yet here's the evidence in front of them. Well, to this they replied, you were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us? And they throw the man out. Jesus heard that they'd thrown him out. And when he found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? Who is he, sir? The man asked. Tell me so that I may believe in him. Jesus said, you have now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you. Then the man said, Lord, I believe. And he worshipped him. Jesus said, here's the punchline of the whole thing. Jesus said, for judgment I've come into this world so that the blind will see and those who see will become blind. Some Pharisees who were with him heard him say this and asked, what, are we blind too? Jesus said, if you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty of sin. But now you claim you can see, your guilt remains. Very truly I say to you, Pharisees, anyone who doesn't enter the sheepfold by the gate. And then Jesus gives his commentary. Have you worked out who the characters are yet? It's kind of obvious, isn't it? He's the sheep, or it's the blind man. He's trying to decide who to follow. Who are the thieves and the robbers? Well, it is the religious leaders out for themselves, brutalizing this man's family, threatening him, unwilling to budge from their presuppositions. They've already decided, and they are impervious to the evidence. Who is the good shepherd? Jesus is. He finds this man that they've thrown out and speaks gently to him and kindly to him and says, you've now seen, literally seen, for the first time in your life, you've seen your Messiah. And he follows him. Well, where does that leave us? I guess we're sheep as well, aren't we? We're deciding who to follow. And Jesus says, follow me. I'm the good shepherd. And just beware of the others who are out to exploit you. And they promise a lot to you, but in the end, if you wrong them, they'll crush you. They're not out to serve you. Jesus gives this warning in verse 39. For judgment I've come into this world so that the blind will see and those who see will become blind. It's just a warning to us because there is real evidence here. It's not just Jesus giving a claim. It's Jesus doing something extraordinary, historical, factual, checked out by the guy's parents and by the whole village in front of witnesses so that we could be sure. But there's just a warning here because there's a way of approaching this evidence where you go, I will not accept it. I am not willing to accept this. And Jesus just warns us that if we're on that trajectory, as the Pharisees are, we end up becoming blind. There's a way of kind of closing your eyes to spiritual things, that the more you do it, the more stuck you get. Whereas on the other hand, there's a way of opening your eyes to spiritual things, which doesn't mean throwing your brain away. It just means looking at the evidence and being open to the facts that leads you to see who Jesus is, which is what happens to the man. And which is it going to be for us? Who are we going to follow? You've got to serve somebody. Well, you've got to ask if it's true. And there's the history here, there's the facts here. You've got to ask if it makes sense of the world. But you've also got to decide, is he good? I remember when I heard the gospel, the Christian message, here in Cambridge in 1993, 1994, my first year. And I got convinced it was true. I mean, it wasn't just in one go, just in a one-off talk. It was a whole process over a couple of terms of thinking pretty hard and reading some of this stuff. And I thought, I think it is true, but I just don't know if I want it to be true. I was just keeping it at arm's length because it's one thing to be kind of convinced philosophically, isn't it? But it's another thing to decide I'm going to follow him. But then you reflect on these things. You reflect on how does he treat people? How does he treat this man? And you ask yourself, what is he offering? This green pasture equivalent for human beings. And then you ask yourself, what is he willing to do to get that for us? The Good Shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He dies on the cross for the sheep. He sacrifices himself willingly for the sheep, only to be raised again. And there is no other leader like that. I don't know where you're up to in your thinking. If this is your first time ever in church, then, welcome. And thanks for, it's probably your head spinning at this point. No one's asking you to make a snap decision about this. But I'd love for you to take it further somehow. Don't just shelve it, but just resolve to find out more. And there's a few ways you could do that. This course that was on the video looks great. And why not come along for week 1 and see if it's any good? And I'm sure they won't chase you endlessly. They're not allowed to, are they, because of GDPR. So you can come once and then say, remove my details. Or come once and then come twice if it's any good. You could try that. Or you could read this. I'd really recommend. We just looked at 2 chapters, but the whole thing's pretty interesting. Why not take it home and read it? I guess for other people, there just might be someone here. This is not the first you've heard of all this. And for some time you've been looking at the claims of Jesus and you've become convinced, I think this is true. But more than that, you've become convinced, I think I want to follow him. And so I'm going to say a prayer now that if you wanted to, you could pray to God to begin that journey as a sheep of the Lord Jesus, with him as your shepherd. And I'll just pray, and if you want to, just echo it in your heart, and the Lord will hear. And you can begin this journey. So I'm going to ask all of us just to close our eyes and bow our heads out of respect for those who want to pray. No pressure to, but if you'd like to, let's pray together. Dear God, thank you for coming yourself to shepherd your sheep. Lord, I admit that I've sometimes followed the wrong people or the wrong things or the wrong goals. Lord, I see the emptiness or the danger in other paths that want to exploit me and hurt me. Thank you that the Lord Jesus has come for my good, to give me life to the full. Thank you as well, Father, that he doesn't just promise this, but he's willing to sacrifice himself in order that that might happen. His death on the cross and his resurrection from the dead. Thank you, Father, that this isn't just a matter of blind faith, but there's evidence and facts and historical extraordinary events that I'm convinced are true. I'm convinced that he is true. And I would like to start to follow him. Please help me to trust him and to put my life in his hands from this day forward. Amen.